The first thing Maren Vale noticed about her husband on their wedding day was not his tailored charcoal suit or the way the morning sunlight caught the silver in his dark hair. It was the sadness in his eyes. Everyone else saw success. They saw the powerful CEO of a billion-dollar logistics company standing beneath a canopy of white roses, waiting for the woman who had agreed to become his wife. But Maren saw loneliness. It was the kind that settled deep inside a person and learned how to smile for photographs. 3 months earlier, she had been sitting in her tiny apartment, staring at overdue bills spread across her kitchen table. Her mother's medical debt had swallowed her savings. The bookstore where she worked had closed unexpectedly. At 32, she was exhausted from constantly fighting just to stay afloat. Then she met Callum Thorne. He was calm, respectful, and surprisingly ordinary for someone whose face occasionally appeared in business magazines. He never promised her fairy tales. Instead, he offered honesty. He told her he wanted companionship, stability, and someone who valued loyalty more than headlines. Maren wanted stability too. Neither of them pretended it was a grand romance. At least, not in the beginning. Before we continue, take a moment to like this video, subscribe to Kindness Hub, and share your thoughts in the comments. If you believe kindness, second chances, and unexpected love can change lives, help us spread these stories by sharing this video with someone who needs hope today. Their wedding was small and elegant, held on a bright spring afternoon at a historic estate outside the city. The guests included executives, board members, and a handful of friends Maren barely knew. Callum had no close family present. When she asked him about it weeks earlier, he simply said his family situation was complicated. Maren didn't push. Everyone has scars they aren't ready to reveal. After the ceremony, she moved into Callum's sprawling home overlooking the harbor. The house was beautiful but strangely empty. It felt more like a carefully designed museum than a place where people truly lived. Every room was immaculate. Every shelf was perfectly arranged. Every morning, Callum left for work before sunrise and returned after dark. Yet despite his demanding schedule, he remained thoughtful. He remembered how she liked her coffee. He asked about her mother's appointments. He listened when she spoke. Slowly, comfort began replacing the awkwardness between them. For the first time in years, Maren felt safe. But safety has a way of making hidden things stand out. She noticed Callum disappearing every Saturday afternoon without explanation. She noticed the locked room at the end of the upstairs hallway. She noticed how his expression changed whenever children appeared in television commercials or passed them in restaurants. His eyes softened with something that looked painfully close to grief. One afternoon, while organizing books in the study, Maren found an old photograph tucked inside a financial report. It showed Callum sitting on a park bench beside a young girl with dark curls and a bright yellow backpack. The girl couldn't have been older than 8. Both of them were laughing. On the back of the photograph, written in faded ink, were 4 words. "My favorite Saturday ever." Maren stared at the picture for a long time. Callum had never mentioned a daughter. That evening, she almost asked him about it, but the exhaustion on his face stopped her. Days turned into weeks. Questions piled up inside her. Who was the little girl? Why had he hidden her existence? And why did the thought of asking seem to frighten him so much? One rainy Saturday, Callum left the house earlier than usual. Maren watched his car disappear through the front gates. An hour later, unable to ignore her instincts any longer, she walked upstairs to the locked room. For weeks, she had respected his privacy. But secrets have weight. Eventually, they become impossible to carry. She tried the handle. Locked. Then she remembered seeing a small brass key in Callum's desk drawer. Her hands trembled as she unlocked the door. The room beyond stole her breath. The walls were painted soft blue. Books lined custom shelves. A telescope stood near the window. Framed drawings covered one wall. There were stuffed animals on the bed and trophies arranged neatly on a dresser. It wasn't a storage room. It was a child's bedroom. And someone had preserved it exactly as it had once been. Maren sat on the edge of the bed, trying to understand what she was seeing. On the nightstand sat another photograph of the same little girl. Beside it was a hospital bracelet. The name read, Eliza Thorne. Maren's chest tightened. There was only one explanation she could imagine, and none of them ended without heartbreak. She heard the front door downstairs. Footsteps echoed through the hallway. Then Callum appeared in the doorway. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The pain on his face answered every question she had been carrying. He looked defeated. Not angry. Not betrayed. Simply tired. As though he had spent years running from a memory that had finally caught up with him. He sat carefully in the desk chair and lowered his gaze. 6 years earlier, he told her, his daughter Eliza had died from a rare heart condition. She was 9 years old. His wife had left shortly after the funeral, unable to survive the crushing weight of grief that filled every corner of their lives. The marriage ended quietly. Everything else ended with it. Callum buried himself in work because work demanded numbers instead of feelings. Meetings instead of memories. Targets instead of tears. Building his company became easier than rebuilding himself. But every Saturday, he visited the Children's Cardiac Center where Eliza had spent her final months. He read stories. Helped families with expenses. Sat beside frightened children whose parents needed a moment to breathe. He never spoke about it because talking about Eliza made her absence feel new all over again. The room stayed untouched because changing it felt like losing her twice. Maren listened in silence as tears rolled down his face. For the first time since she'd met him, the successful CEO disappeared. In his place sat a grieving father who had been carrying impossible pain alone. That night, they sat together in Eliza's room until sunset painted the walls gold. Neither of them tried to fix the sadness. They simply shared it. In the weeks that followed, something changed between them. Their marriage stopped being an arrangement built on practicality and became something deeper. Something honest. Callum invited Maren to join him at the cardiac center. At first, she worried she would feel like an outsider stepping into a sacred place. Instead, she discovered the hidden life her husband had spent years protecting. Children ran toward him the moment he entered. Parents hugged him. Nurses smiled when they saw him. He knew every child's name. Every parent's story. Every fear hiding behind exhausted eyes. He funded surgeries anonymously. Paid rent for struggling families. Arranged transportation for parents who couldn't afford gas. He never told anyone who he was. To those children, he wasn't a CEO. He was simply Mr. Callum. The man who brought books, puzzles, and hope. Watching him there, Maren finally understood. The life he had hidden wasn't scandalous. It wasn't selfish. It was beautiful. And it existed because grief had transformed into compassion. Over time, she became part of it too. She organized fundraising events and created support groups for parents navigating impossible diagnoses. Together, they built something neither of them expected. Purpose. One summer afternoon, nearly a year after their wedding, they stood in the newly opened family wing of the cardiac center. Above the entrance hung a simple sign. The Eliza Thorne Family Resource Center. Callum squeezed Maren's hand as children laughed nearby. For the first time since she had known him, the sadness in his eyes had softened. It hadn't disappeared. Perhaps grief never truly leaves. But it had made room for joy. Later that evening, they returned home and sat together in Eliza's room. The door no longer stayed locked. Fresh flowers sat on the windowsill. New books filled the shelves. The room had become a place of remembrance instead of sorrow. A place where love remained alive. Maren realized something important then. She had married Callum for stability. For security. For a future that felt certain. But love rarely arrives the way we expect. Sometimes it hides behind grief. Sometimes it waits inside broken places. And sometimes the people carrying the heaviest pain are the same people quietly changing the world. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, share it with someone you love, and subscribe to Kindness Hub for more stories that remind us compassion still exists. Special request: comment below with the words, "Love leaves a light," if you believe the people we lose continue to inspire kindness in the lives we live. As the sun disappeared beyond the harbor that evening, Maren rested her head on Callum's shoulder and looked around the room that once held only silence. It now held memories. Hope. And a future neither of them had imagined when they first said their vows. Because the greatest secret Callum Thorne had hidden was not a second life. It was the extraordinary size of his heart. And in helping him carry his grief, Maren discovered that true stability isn't found in wealth or beautiful homes. It's found in having someone who trusts you enough to share their pain. Sometimes, the strongest marriages are not built on perfect beginnings. They're built when two wounded people decide to stop carrying their burdens alone.